Perfect. I think we're ready. We're good to go to start today's webinar on uncovering unique search engine marketing capabilities with Similarweb and ChatGPT. Today, we're going to be looking at this topic and breaking it down into 4 areas. Before I go into the content, so just quickly want to recap. Please feel free to ask any questions anytime. To do so, you'll see at the bottom of your screen a Q&A button. Simply click that and type in your question. We will be answering questions throughout the webinar itself. So without further ado, let's look at the materials we're going to begin over on today's webinar. The first is looking and making sure you can use ChatGPT. And one of the ways in which you can do that is to use things called prompts. So we're going to be analyzing what these prompts are. And more importantly, we're going to be laser focusing on this to search marketing. The second section is going to cover how you can use Similarweb's functionalities together with ChatGPT so that you can start to develop underperforming sweet spots and, more importantly, start to develop another better understanding of your competitors. Thirdly, we're going to be looking at content. ChatGPT is all primarily around text-based content, so it's really fundamental that we know the frameworks of what makes good content today, and more importantly, how ChatGPT can help you to maximize your content efforts. And finally, we're going to show you one of the many examples that our own internal marketing team uses when it comes to using ChatGPT and Similarweb together. So without further ado, let's dive in so you can start to develop winning insights for your search strategies. Digital marketing has a lot of noise. Google, for example, releases updates all the time. Some of them are quite significant and they generate lots of conversations. So about, for instance, 11 years ago, voice search as a concept was released. Today, I think actually a lot of marketers speak about voice search, but no one actually has a voice search strategy, a voice search campaign. They don't have, for example, even a mobile first strategy often in lots of companies. And as a result, there's a lot of noise that typically happens when these releases are done. And ChatGPT is no different. You know, I think when we look more broadly at things like artificial intelligence, you know, we're still in hospitals, for instance, in an industry that still uses paper on a clipboard. Whilst there's really good, fantastic use cases of this technology, the world overall has to develop a lot more faster than what it is. Now, ChatGPT and artificial intelligence will help get that speed quick to get us there quicker. But essentially what I'm also saying is, whilst this is a very topical topic, I want us to be cautious that we need to be thinking about best practice digital marketing strategies to drive your performance forward. So today it's all about ChatGPT. Before we jump in and start looking at what ChatGPT is, we have a very quick poll for you guys. The question is, are you using ChatGPT? There's 3 responses. Yes, I love it. Not sure, but it's on my to-do list. And third and finally, we also have what's ChatGPT? Wow, got loads of answers coming in. Everyone's answering, which is brilliant. And coming across loud and clear, most people are using ChatGPT. In fact, in this webinar, 76% of all of you are actually using ChatGPT. So brilliant. After today's webinar, hopefully you'll get a few hints and tips of how you can better use ChatGPT results. So today it's all about ChatGPT. And the reason for that is the speed to market has been insane. ChatGPT has been the fastest piece of technology to reach 1 million users. It took Netflix over 3 years. It took Twitter over 2, and other social medias have been very fast, but they have got there in months, not days. And this is one of the reasons why ChatGPT is a massive buzzword in all industries. Really interestingly for ChatGPT, because they were the first technology to create a function and an interface, they actually forced the market to show their cards. Google and Meta have released their versions of ChatGPT. So it's led the way. And as a result, you're going to also hear a lot of conversations around simulating human conversations. Natural language are also going to be the latest buzzwords. For example, in customer service, people will be using AI to automate emails, for example. And like any technology, we need to use it with caution. We need to ask basic things like, can I trust this? Is it up to date? And can I actually confirm that this is an authoritative source where this information came from? Now, critically, when it comes to ChatGPT, and really interestingly, the ChatGPT index was last updated in September 2021. In other words, it doesn't know things that are happening today in the world. And actually, what becomes really interesting about ChatGPT, as you can see on this slide, when you ask it on the surface a relatively simple question like, when was your index last updated? It gives you a fluffy answer. But actually, if you ask it again in another way, it can actually reveal what the answer is. So in other words, what we're also saying here is when we're going over these prompts, be cautious that you might want to reword your query. And as a result, you're going to get much better results. Interestingly, when it comes to search engine marketing, ChatGPT, by establishing itself early, is starting to change search engine market share. Bing, for example, wasn't really an engine where brands were starting to think about investing more money in. But actually, Bing is a really good search engine to be doing that. In fact, there are multiple search engines where brands should be investing their money in. What I think is going to happen is we're going to move away from a Google-only search strategy to a Google-first search strategy with other secondary strategies behind that. And brands over the coming months are going to be testing, which they actually should be doing anyways, a lot more activity on, for example, Bing pay-per-click. And the reason why this is going to become more to the fore very soon, Bing traffic has increased by 15% and Google has gone down 2.4, which is quite significant movement in the market. And despite the buzz of ChatGPT, it is and should be used as a supporting tool for both SEO and PPC teams. It helps you when you're stuck. It uses simple, concise language, and it helps you, more importantly, to generate ideas and concepts. But critically, ChatGPT is a perception. It's not the perception or the way of doing things. So let's go into basic prompts. The first and really good way of using ChatGPT is to simply ask it things like, as if it was a person, as if it was a colleague. Write 3 meta descriptions that not only includes the main keyword for a web page, but also a call to action for the topic intermittent fasting. It's automatically going to churn you out 3 meta descriptions. Other ways to ask this are things like tell me about, how to calculate, and so on. If you ask it as if it's a specific person, it will actually live in that entity itself. So when you ask it things like act as if you're an astronaut for writing a meta description for landing on the moon, you'll notice that it gets the concept of thinking of themselves as being an astronaut, like explore the final frontier for yourself. So it gets that persona and understands it quite well. Other way of asking this is you are an expert in, for example, astronomy, and so on. Also, it's really good at simplifying and explaining some very complex topics. So you can ask ChatGPT to explain, for instance, information retrieval vectors to me as if I am 5 years old. It can help you very quickly to understand some very complex topics. Now, that's all the basic prompts. That's literally getting in and asking it things. Now we want to dive into some more advanced prompts. ChatGPT is fantastic at technical concepts, even if you're not from a technical background. So in the world of search marketing, you could be asking it things like, write a regex expression to get queries in Google Search Console that start with what and where. And this is literally going to create you regex expressions. It can also be extremely useful for things like Google Sheet formulas, Excel macros, or even, for instance, translating content. You can use it in many different ways, despite not having 100% knowledge of what that thing is. A really fantastic way is to use frameworks. So these are some industry standard frameworks, like, for example, AIDA. It stands for attention, interest, desire, and action. So whenever you go in, use one of these frameworks, like, for example, using the BAB framework, write 500 words of a sales copy about your product, about our product, a vegan chicken burger. Now, critically, a really good way to strategically use ChatGPT is to also ask it to ask you questions. That really improves the outputs of content. So please ask me as many questions as you can about our products and customers before you begin. What this is automatically allowing you to do is to go back and give it more information, and it will produce an even higher output for you and for you to actually experiment and explore. And critically, when you ask it in the framework, it does so. It does it in a problem solution basis, which is really important to get the concept. Now, actually, it's not just about using ChatGPT for standard frameworks. Be strategic and think about the digital marketing frameworks. So in the world of paid search, we have a lot of frameworks, one of which is responsive search ads, RSA. So simply ask it, create 2 Google ads in an RSA format using multiple headlines and descriptions for an A/B test for electric blankets. Explain why the ads make a good test. And what it'll do is not only present those as you've asked, but it explains why. In this case, ad 1 is emphasizing the cozy feeling and a variety of other options. Option 2 is more around the practical benefits. In other words, what we're saying here is option 1 is getting to the emotional side of the consumer, and option 2 is more to the theory side of the product. So you now have a ton of ideas so that you can avoid using duplicated, non-targeted ad copy. So lots of other prompts can be used, but be cautious. ChatGPT doesn't have all of the answers. So when you ask it things like create 2 Google ads in the RSA format for electronic cigarettes, just like Google and ChatGPT, they have a lot of what we call restricted keywords. In other words, there's certain topics where these engines don't want to get involved in because, for example, they can't verify the age of the searcher and potential buyer of the product due to, for instance, local laws. And as a result, they just simply provide no information. So they still do have issues around prohibited keywords. And ChatGPT can get the basics wrong. So when you ask it a fairly basic prompt, categorize these keywords into 3 stages of the buyer's journey of awareness, consideration, decision. It's saying that there's no decision keywords in here because none of these terms have the term buy in them. That's not true, they do. As a result, just be cautious that what ChatGPT presents back to you isn't necessarily the only way of which you can obtain that information. And secondly, it's not verifying that that information is true. Now, like Google, as mentioned, ChatGPT also has restricted or prohibited keywords. As you're going to see at the very end of this webinar, Similarweb is in a fantastic opportunity because we actually provide search volume of keywords that Google and ChatGPT and the other engines don't provide any information on. And it's purely on the basis of how we collect our data. One of them, for example, is around cigarettes, which we have a substantial amount of search volume on. So ChatGPT keyword research uses keywords in its database and nothing else. So going back to us with our digital marketing mindset on, it's not using things like monthly search volume. It's not using things like keyword difficulty or competition level. As a result, treat ChatGPT as a perception, an idea that I can further explore using the expertise I have and knowledge of digital marketing. Any questions so far coming in the chat feature? I think we've got a few. Someone's asking, can you share the slides or recording of the webinar afterwards? Absolutely. If the index date is valid for ChatGPT 4, only the free version, it's valid for all of them. And we have another question here of, have you used the real-time internet access already? What's your opinion? So I think maybe you're referring to Google Bard, perhaps. Again, it's actually a very interesting concept because essentially what they're doing is coming under the search results, which I do think is going to have a massive impact on click-through rates and potential traffic. And actually, critically, I think the big question here is, how do these engines also basically get profit as a result of this too? So there's a paid element of it as well. So the second section we want to cover is around using Similarweb and ChatGPT together. So this is an example of one of Similarweb's features. It's called search ads. And as the name suggests, it shows you the paid search ads for any website that you input in any country and device, and more importantly, within any time frame. And what you can see is for Walmart, for instance, they actually have a lot of duplicated ad copy. And as we've seen before, you now have a fantastic tool to overcome these problems. So simply go in, ask ChatGPT to pretend you're a paid search expert. You work for a large online retailer and want to write and optimize for the keyword PlayStation 5, write 5 descriptions. This is going to generate you a lot of ideas. Glance through things that you think are on brand, what things you can use, and actually that helps you then to formulate your ad copy. Also, don't forget about your product range and the consumer. So also ask questions like, what are the key differences between a PlayStation 5 and a Nintendo Switch? And it really helps you to get into the mindset of the consumer and what they may be looking for. Critically, it's always about your target audience. So develop an audience profile of users who purchase PlayStation 5 versus Nintendo Switch. And actually, you can go and validate this data against, for example, our demographic data that we have on Similarweb. And that really helps you to target keywords for things like banner ads, display, and so on. Also, use it to generate loads of ideas. So there's no reason why anyone should have any duplicated ad copy as a result of ChatGPT, because you can also ask it things like suggest 5 Google ad copies no longer than 90 characters to sell PlayStation 5. And you now have a brilliant foundation to work off and finalize that will work for your own website. You can also ask it to develop competitive content intelligence. So what this means is you can also use features like organic pages or paid pages. And as the name suggests, what it'll do is for any website you input, it'll show you a list of URLs that successfully drives traffic within a given time frame in a given market and device. And what it's going to do is actually allow you to find out what content from a non-seasonal evergreen perspective are my competitors doing really well for. And you can now use ChatGPT to try and outrank that competitor for that same topic. So in the case here of Vogue.com in the United States, the first 2 suggestions are actually relating at the time to the Oscars, whereas the third one is all around selecting the best aftershave. So all you got to do is start asking ChatGPT the blog post on what are the best colognes for men discusses an author's experience. In essence, what you're doing here is actually asking it using copying and pasting the text of the blog post and say, pretend you're a content marketing expert. How would you summarize the strengths and weaknesses of this blog post? You now have a ton of analysis happening in the background that automatically allows you to properly find out what are the strengths and weaknesses of text. And what you can see is it gives a very clear strength because it provides useful insights on how to choose the perfect cologne for men. But the biggest weakness is that it focuses on the author's personal experience and preference. Then what you want to do is go back to ChatGPT, now that we have an understanding that the blog post is biased towards an author's experience. And then what you're going to do is say, how would a cologne expert review? Basically, how can you actually do an expert review on this? And it'll break down really nicely, potentially how you can structure your content. So you might want to talk about, for example, the different types of notes, top, middle, and base. You can start talking about the chemistry on people's skin, for example, and the interaction that has on the longevity of the fragrance. You can start talking about some technical terms within the space of cologne expertise. So it really can do a lot of research in the background to help you to outrank the current leader for a particular topic. But whatever you do, do not copy and paste ChatGPT's text and publish it on your own website. The main reason for this is AI text has fingerprint-like traits. So a really good guy in the industry called Mark Williams Cook did a fantastic experiment last year using ChatGPT. And what he found was when he published a website using only content from ChatGPT, he found actually that website for a few months continued to increase in traffic. Then what happened is what often happens in the case of Google penalty updates when you've negatively been impacted by one, you'll actually see that the traffic basically goes off a cliff. What's basically happened here is Google's worked out that this content has simply been generated by ChatGPT. It's not really providing much user to the searcher. And as a result, it's going to rank other websites that have done lots of research and have followed a concept called EAT in the framework of creating content, which we're going to be talking about very soon. So be very cautious of just simply copying and pasting text and looking for really good performance. It doesn't work like that. There are other tools out there with a note of caution. One of them is called, for example, Quillbot, and they can basically rewrite text so it doesn't look ChatGPT-like. But the problem is it's still risky because it's being generated by AI. And the other big issue is it also might have its own fingerprint-like trait, and that can become problematic for you later down the line. So the key to success when it comes to content is all around what we call EAT. It stands for experience, expertise, authority, and trust. Before we go into this concept, we're going to take a very quick look at the question and answers. If using ChatGPT and SEO content badly affect rankings, I think hopefully we've just covered that on just the example about 30 seconds ago. ChatGPT released a beta version with real-time internet access. Check it out. Good suggestion. I had issues when asking ChatGPT to meet a certain character count. For example, I asked for 30 characters and ChatGPT gave me more characters in my output. Any solutions you have found? And that's actually really interesting. I personally haven't seen that. But one thing you can do is also ask it for a formula that counts the characters in Excel or Google Sheets. And actually that'll help you to look at that more granularly in literally a column of your results. Another question we have coming in for this section is, can you also share the recording of this presentation? It would be super helpful. Absolutely, we will do. Actually, final question, I think, for this section is, can you explain better this fingerprint-like traits? How is it even possible? It's a natural language model. Moreover, I'm currently using other tools like ChatGPT, like for instance, private libraries. So basically what we're saying is the way in which it produces content, it's a bit like actually thinking about one of your friends, they're going to use certain language, they're going to say certain words quite regularly. Text isn't really that different. People have a writing style. And what we're saying with this fingerprint-like trait is basically when artificial intelligence, in this case, ChatGPT, creates content, you can actually tell that it is from them because the way in which they write it, they have their own writing style. And that's basically what we were getting at. So more importantly, it's not just about copying and pasting content and thinking about success and having long-term plans. All content needs to follow a framework called EAT. And EAT stands for experience, expertise, authority, and trust. So let's dive in to each of these so that you can start to produce really valuable future-proof content. Experience. It's making sure that we've considered the extent to which the content creator has the necessary first-hand or life experience of the topic. And that's why we're using prompts like pretend you are an expert in, for example, because it helps us on that journey of getting more experience in our content. The second concept in this is actually to make sure that we're thinking about other people using the product and actually having evidence of that, whether that's, for example, a product review or quotes that customers have said, so that you can demonstrate that they have actually you've got experience in this particular topic area. More importantly, you would want to have people who create that content, who have a wealth of personal experience. So going back to that Vogue example, one reason why Vogue ranks really well for best cologne for men, for instance, is because they've really gone down a wealth of experience of an author who specializes in cologne. But as we saw using ChatGPT, you can actually find very big, significant weaknesses so that you can develop a lot more experience in your content. For example, the top, middle, and base notes. The other E in EAT stands for experience, expertise. And it's things like making sure you name your authors, your editors, you've got expert reviewers. They're great entities to have on websites and showcase them as such. You want to provide context about them and their credentials. For example, do you link to their LinkedIn social media profile because maybe they have a degree in a certain thing that is of relevance and shows they've got experience in a particular topic? Like, for example, a doctor having a health blog. We should want to showcase that type of information. You also have a concept here called authority. You want to make sure you're investing in individual experts at your company to expand their presence, their level of expertise, authority, and trust. And you want to make sure that you're also linking out to other authoritative sources. And finally, in this concept, you've also got trustworthiness. You want to make sure you're disclosing information about the business, such as the company's mission, the editorial and advertising policies, and even, for example, who the founders are, who the leadership team is, what experience do they bring to the company. All of that can provide lots of trustworthiness in your content before you've even started to write it. So that's what EAT stands for. There's another really important concept in content marketing, and it stands for your money, your life. And what this basically means is if you're writing any content that can impact a person's wealth or lifestyle, that website is going to get a lot more scrutiny of search engines. So in other words, it's going to look for things like how authoritative is this? Another way of looking at this is fake news, for example, versus authentic news. So if you're writing about anything around government and law, health and safety, things like shopping or purchasing decisions, that's going to be scrutinized quite significantly. So your content in particular needs to shine when it comes to EAT. So this is an example of a website who's not following best practices. They have an article on choosing tips to choose a pension pot. They have an author, it's great. They've said when they've updated the content, it's massively out of date. So it's good and it can be improved. They can also add things here like estimated reading level. So do you need to be an expert in this topic before I read it? Can I actually read it if I'm just new to the concept? In which case you might want to have like beginner, advanced, and so on. This page talks later in it about things like calculating your retirement income. That doesn't match intent. This page itself doesn't even have a calculator on it, or it doesn't even give a simple equation that you can use on Excel or Google Sheets, for example, to actually calculate your retirement income. This, in the world of search, does not reflect user intent. And more importantly, when you start looking at the top ranked pages for calculators, you can actually see that all of these pages, when you go into them, they all actually, for example, contain a calculator. So they're all very much about the intent of how to calculate a pension pot. And one of the reasons why this particular website didn't do very well is because it didn't match user intent. Now, interestingly, when it comes to Google explicitly, they actually don't have a policy that says you shouldn't be using ChatGPT, because they do see the value of it helping to deliver helpful information. But notice in their guidelines, it doesn't say, and it does say things like EAT framework. So it's a really, really important concept to get. And critically, it's making sure that we're using ChatGPT as a perception, not replacing a content writer, for example. So how can you use this in light of the EAT framework? You can now go and look in one of your review websites, for example, Google Reviews, Yale.com, and so on. And what you can do is copy and paste your positive, neutral, or even negative reviews. Do this individually and ask ChatGPT to summarize what are the, for example, 10 main problems people have. And what it's then going to do is basically tell you, why do people like my brand? Why do people dislike my brand? And why do people sit on the fence about my brand? More importantly, do this at a product level. So if you've got a website and you've got multiple products, literally be looking at reviews, tag them, assign them into, for example, one business unit versus another. And that will really help you to truly understand what people think of your brand, which can be really important for improving your authority, trustworthiness, and so on. Another way in which you can do this is, for example, really enhancing a paragraph of text. So how can I sound more like a, for instance, sound engineering expert in this paragraph of text? Simply copy and paste the text, and it will actually help you to sound more like an expert, which you can also name. And critically, this helps you to maximize your content itself. So a fantastic way in which you can use ChatGPT is to look at all of the digital assets you have. You can have, for example, videos, slideshows, blog posts. And what you can then do is simply say, pretend you're a digital marketing consultant, create 12 Twitter tweets using this blog post, and it will now give you suggestions based on text you've copied and pasted of the blog post, of tweets that you can write about in relation to that particular blog post. But be careful. In the world of artificial intelligence, there's a concept called hallucinations. So AI can sound convincing despite it being incorrect. So when you put in this case, summarize this URL, by the way, this is not a good prompt to use because it doesn't really understand URLs. And actually, more importantly, it doesn't understand recent URLs. So in this case, it starts to say that this particular URL is talking about Berlin in Germany, about COVID-19. When in fact, this actual article is on Russia's invasion of Ukraine. It's completely different. And actually, the article itself and the response that it gives is massively convincing that this article is about Germany and COVID. It's not like that at all. So always be having that cautious mindset in the background. As mentioned at the start, we also are going to show you how our own marketing team use ChatGPT alongside one another. So what they do is they'll say things like provide a list of campaign dates. For instance, Slack has done. It will tell you what they are. Notice, of course, it stops in 2021. And what it allows you then to do is to pick one of these that you want to dig deeper in. So in this case, for 2021, you've got the connective tissue of your company. You can then go in, use our search ad feature, look at that particular year overall. And more importantly, you can actually look at that month by month and find out which paid search ads, in this case, Slack was using. More importantly, it allows you to analyze what call to actions were they using, what brand messaging did they have. All of that's super valuable for analyzing competitors. So you can now go in and find out, okay, if I have a similar campaign based on what another competitor's done, here's potentially a good benchmark for us to do at least or aspire to do. So for example, you can split the number of search ads by device and look and see that this was very much a H1 campaign for Slack, and it was a desktop only campaign. So a summary of Similarweb and ChatGPT. There are lots of phases in digital marketing and there's lots of buzzwords that happen all the time. Don't derail your current strategies and simply just revert to ChatGPT to create content, to get the only source of information to generate ideas. That's not a really good use of ChatGPT. You want to make sure that it can enhance your current strategy. At the end of the day, when you look at digital marketing phases, we've gone here from portals, emails to websites. We've then moved to social media, online search and followers. Then we've also moved things like to mobile, user-generated content. And we're basically in a phase now here of artificial intelligence and machine learning. So we want to make sure we're using this technology, and actually critically, it's helping us to support and create better strategies. So some key takeaways: don't copy and paste from ChatGPT. ChatGPT is a perception. The more information you have in your prompt, the better. For example, frameworks. Get competitors' content, strengths and weaknesses so that you can build upon not only ideas, but actually other strategies like A/B testing of ad copy. and also use ChatGPT to reveal competitors' campaigns. So you can go back in time, for example, looking at search ads that were used for that particular campaign, and actually get more intel onto things like brand messaging and so on. So before we quickly go into a Similarweb demonstration, I'm going to take a few questions. Have you tried these strategies with Bard yet? Yes, they work equally with Bard. That's for anyone that isn't aware, that's with that's Google's version of ChatGPT. Something that I can do when ChatGPT gives me too many characters in response is make this response 30 characters. Really fantastic tip. I haven't actually personally tried that, but it sounds very logical. So thanks very much for sharing that tip. Another question is, I read articles that mention utilizing ChatGPT for prediction and forecasting. For example, predicting consumer demand for a specific product based on historical trends. I tried doing this for some product brand, but was unsuccessful. Any tips? So interestingly, ChatGPT doesn't have a direct source, like for example, to search volume. So it's not very good for digital marketers actually for that. But one thing you can do is feed it any insights that you have. So based on this data, what trend can you predict? And that data could be search volume. You can literally give it a list of keywords. In fact, you can actually even ask ChatGPT, instead of giving you textual paragraphs of text, you can actually even ask it to produce this in a table format. So you can actually get very creative with actually providing it lots of really valuable information so that it can better give you a response. These examples seem very focused towards SEO or PPC teams using ChatGPT on a day-to-day. Do you have any examples of how sales professionals can use Similarweb and ChatGPT that resonates with prospects in outbound selling? Fantastic question, actually. So yes, this particular webinar was focused on search marketing, PPC and SEO. Having said that, if you are a sales professional, it's really good to think about the personas of people. What would make people buy a particular product that had these features? You can get those features off, for example, a product page on a website, and that will really help you to really start selling the really valuable stuff of a particular product. Actually, critically with Similarweb, we have a solution called Sales Intelligence, where you can get things like email addresses of websites. That can be really, really valuable too for your outbound selling. Another question. Is there a tool to check if the content is produced by AI? No, there's not. At the moment, there's no way of saying that this was produced by that. Having said that, I do think something like that, I'm sure, will be invented very soon. What are the ways ChatGPT can be used to perform SEO audits for a website? If so, would that information be accurate? It's a really interesting question, because I think in terms of ChatGPT, because it's very text heavy, I think in terms of audit, it's actually quite good at like auditing content, which is very much in line with EEAT, which is amazing because that's where content should be created. So in answer to your question, it's really good for getting like the strengths of content. What are the missing opportunities that I have if I wanted to sell this to a particular persona? It can actually help you to identify that so that you can enhance existing content. So that would be a big recommendation to use. Do you have any tips for Meta, Facebook, Instagram ads? Do we do the same as for PPC? No, so I think it's really interesting because actually I think this comes down to demographic data, and demographics change by market quite considerably, and obviously by website. So it's also about thinking about, there's more, for the most part, on Facebook overall across all industries. More older people use Facebook. And as a result, if you're really trying to optimize and get an audience for the older buyer, it's a fantastic medium. I think, and what's really important here is to make sure you've got an integrated approach and you just don't have a one channel, one engine approach. That's not really going to be effective because of the way in which, like, for example, Bing increased 15% market share. So some tips that you want to do is make sure that you're looking at things like YouTube, and we actually segment websites by use case, not necessarily just saying YouTube, but actually going by video, where you then look at YouTube, Vimeo, TikTok, and so on. And that really helps you to come up with that really integrated search strategy that aligns with digital assets. And that really will help you to start building that out. Final question we have, as Bard is coming up, There's also some rumor that will affect on SEO content. Any recommendations? Yes, I think with that experiment Mark did, as we showed on one of the previous slides, it does show that it will have a very short shelf life of performance when it's generated by AI. But actually, I think what's going to do is actually make content and really change the game of content marketing, where basically every content marketer now has another perception in their team that can get real-time information. So if anything, it's actually probably going to improve the quality of content. Final question before we go into the demonstration. Can you use ChatGPT to check ad relevance, accuracy of meta descriptions? You can to a certain extent. So what you would need to do is to create lots of prompts. So for example, is this ad copy using the RSA framework of Google relevant to a buyer that is demographics, gender, has interests in? And that will actually help you to validate that information. And then more importantly, during that same conversation, you can actually go back and ask it for suggestions of other good titles that you can create in your ad copy. So without further ado, for those of you that hasn't seen Similarweb, this is it. This is our platform. We have loads of different features, which unfortunately we don't have a lot of time on. But what I want to do is just show you a few big key concepts. One fantastic and well-known thing that we're renowned for is website traffic. So what it's allowing you to do is to go in and find out how much traffic our website's generating. So you can literally go in, put in a website, like for example, Jimmy Choo. And what it's now going to do is tell you how well that particular website does, by which device does it generate most traffic, which industry does it sit in. You can actually go in and look at an individual industry itself and find other websites within that space so that you can analyze how they're performing over time. More importantly, you can have a look at the marketing channels that's driving a lot of that success to that industry, and that will really help you to work out, should I be looking at Google, Facebook, Twitter, and so on? Really, really nice way of looking at it. And then, of course, for the digital marketer, we also have a segmentation by digital channel. So in the world of SEO, for example, we have a really amazing feature called rank and distribution. And what that will allow you to do is to go in, look at, for example, some high-end fashion brands like Jimmy Choo, Prada, Gucci, but also it'll actually allow you to look on things like Net-a-Porter, Farfetch. More importantly, it actually has a fantastic coverage on mobile. And what it's allowing you to go and see is, are any of these brands targeting the term luxury? So go in and look for luxury in the keyword. And critically, we have this by website view. So what you can now see, really interestingly, the brands themselves are not targeting luxury as a keyword, but who is? Farfetch and Net-a-Porter. The only brand, in fact, that's doing that, but not very well, is Gucci. But all of these filters speaks to one another. So are they targeting this, for example, for images, product listing ads? Very different story. Farfetch is the only one that's doing it successfully, but success is only 5 keywords on mobile. And that really helps you to slice and dice that data, find out what brands are doing, what types of terms and topics are they optimizing for, and more importantly, ranking for. And if they are ranking, how well are they ranking for those terms? And that's exactly what this is going to show you, a list of keywords that meet the criteria you've inputted. And the 2 criteria are domain and any of the filters you've selected. It's then going to show you the individual rank performance of all of those websites. The search volume, as mentioned in the presentation, we have our own hybrid search volume. It's not dependent on, for example, Google. As a result, we have information on the latest keywords as and when they come up. We also have things like search volume of restricted keywords. All of that becomes really useful when you're selecting content. And then what we also have is a paid search feature, which actually helps you to find out, for example, who's driving paid search traffic at a given term. So in the case here, for example, we have iPhone. You can basically see for iPhone, Apple dominates the paid search market, but actually worldwide, there's this Brazilian website So we now can go in and find out what else is actually happening within that market for iPhone. And actually what you can now see and really break down is who's bidding and successfully driving traffic for any keyword. But actually, you can go and look, for example, at branded keywords like Apple and go and see, are there any opportunities for me to start testing my paid search budget? Maybe in one market, I'm going to do more or do less. As a result of that, does another domain get more or less traffic? More importantly, what markets have a lot less competition in them so that you can strategically start to pay and position paid search? So for example, for Apple in Australia, Apple owns that market, but there's no other domain really successfully driving paid search traffic to it. As a result, that can be a really good pot of gold, which you can go and do further investigations of. And then, of course, there's people maybe on the call who do all sorts of digital marketing. Maybe you do, for example, affiliate marketing, where you can find, for example, affiliates by industry. So let's say, for example, you work in e-commerce. You can find affiliate opportunities. So you can find a whole list of other websites that you potentially can go engage with. You can even get affiliates by keyword. So for example, who speaks about iPhone in Australia? And of course, that might be a much better play if you don't have a lot of budget, for example, for paid search. You might want to start thinking about your other wider digital marketing activities. In this case, you've also got an opportunity to use affiliate marketing. We also have advertising, where you're going to get information around, for example, display ads people have been using. And it's going to tell you what those ads are, who the advertisers are, and all of that good stuff. You can even go down and see, for example, the search ads for a given keyword or an actual website itself. It allows you then to see what keywords people are using, what's their ad copy. More importantly, it helps you to very quickly audit your own website to see which ads do I actually have a lot of duplication of content and so on for. And that is a very quick introduction to Similarweb. Lots of really exciting things for us to come actually in the future. We really want to do things differently. So without further ado, thank you very much for everyone for attending. We've now got a few minutes left. If anyone has any more questions, feel free to pop those in the chat. But for you, more importantly, if the best way to see Similarweb is to get custom insights for your own business and your own websites. So the best way to do that, scan this QR code. You can schedule a call with one of our sales representatives and they will actually show you your own website. More importantly, your competitors' insights, and they'll show you the types of data that you can get as a result of it. We will send these slides around later. This will be a clickable link where you can also schedule that call as well.